Hey yo, what's up everybody? This is part 2 of my recap of patch 2.2, aka Chapter 2 Act 4 of Wuthering Waves. If you haven't seen this video yet, you don't have to. I'm not the boss of you, but I'd like you to. That video covers the past, and this current video covers the present. Essentially all the things we see and hear during the quest, which also include many other things in part 1. The story was pretty straightforward in its presentation, but there were a lot of intricacies in just small but important details. So much so that I don't even think Kuro can keep track of all of them. More on that in another video. By the way, if you enjoy these type of detailed lore recap videos, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me to continue making awesome videos just like this one. Nonetheless, patch 2.4 is right around the corner. So without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so in patch 2.0, Acts 1 through 3, Rover went through it, man. He has a sick friend, he's almost exiled upon arrival, he has to dig into shady schemes of the Order and the Fraxidus, and saving the Carnival and the people of Raguna. My guy was busy. But after all of that, he still hasn't cured Abby of his condition, which was the original reason for this journey. And get this, Abby's condition is getting worse. He's taking even longer to respond now. Sliding into 2.2, boom. The story picks right back up where it left off. Rover and Abby are still trying to find out how to get to the Sentinel, who last said it was ensnared up in some inverted tower in the sky. And Abby's like, yo, why can't I just fly up there? So we head to a spot in Elga Town that might be a nice launch pad to test out Abby's crazy new idea. And then we run into a bard named Chacona, which is a perfect coincidence for her too, because she's been looking for us. Carlotta sent her to get in touch with us because when we last talked to her, we told her about our convo with Cartathea, the blessed martyred maiden, and she's been trying to find her ever since, but she hasn't had any luck. We find out the reason Carlotta sent Chacona, and that's because of her very unique Forte ability. Similar to Full Mean in Act 1, she can create a snapshot of the past with her abilities. However, Chacona's abilities don't just stop at creating that snapshot. It literally recreates the frequencies of the past in such a way that those affected by her forte can actually interact with the past as if it were real. Also, another point of note, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the anniversary event, Bowser gifted us an amazing gift, and that is Cartathea's nickname, Baby Girl Cardi. So from time to time, I will be using that throughout this recap. So anyway, we recount as many details as we can about our initial meeting with Cartathea to Chacona. Then she places us under the influence of her forte, so we can relive the moment that we met Cartathea, and to see if we can find any details that we might have missed when we first met her. And all of this to help us track her down. And boom. Just like that, we are transferred back into that moment in time. We can see ourselves and Cardi interacting, only something unexpected happens. Rover was just supposed to be able to see and experience the past, and he does. But while in this recreation of the past, he's also able to interact with Cardi in the present, or rather her frequency. Both Rover and Cartathea's tacit marks are glowing, signifying some kind of special connection between them, which made this type of special experience possible. Cartathea asks us how we first noticed her at the carnival, and we tell her that we heard the Sentinel's voice and it guided us to her. Then she immediately asks, so if this is true, then tell me, am I their resonator? And Rover doesn't know, because the Sentinel called her the Lost, and Primus Fenrico says she's the Zenodian's resonator. Well, spoiler alert, the answer is kind of complicated. She's kind of both, but neither at the same time. And we'll find out all of this later. And if you already watched part 1, then you already know the deal. Cartathea tells us she was just asking because she's been searching for the answer to this question herself, but her memories have become fragmented. And this is a question she really wants the answer to. This leads her to asking why we're in search of the Sentinel. And we show her Abby. When Abby manifests, he mentions that our frequencies are split, and she tells us that she's also experiencing a type of frequency split, which is something we'll learn more about as the story continues. So anyway, she realizes that Abby's frequency is weakening and understands why we want to find the Sentinel. We end up telling her what the Sentinel told us, which is that it's ensnared in an inverted tower in the sky. And Cartathea basically says, wait a minute, that's where I am. Since you heard that voice, just what is behind those seals? Because remember, we're just talking to her frequency at this point. Her physical body is still up there in the Sonarosphere. She tells us that in the center of the Sonaro is a gateway locked by 3 seals, and she's heard a voice calling out to her and questions if that is a Sentinel. And in the midst of this already lore-heavy conversation, Abby says she smells like a Thernodian. Cartathea is saddened by this, but Rover offers comfort, letting her know that while Abby can generally be trusted on things like this, it might not mean she is indeed the Thernodian's resonator. Rover says that she fought alongside the Sentinel, and it's possible that she could have just been affected by the Thernodian's powers. Nonetheless, Cartathea also wants to find the Sentinel to understand her condition and to get answers to all the questions she has, so we can find out what's going on in the tower and find the Sentinel. Rover wants to go up there and catch up with Cartathea in person. So we ask how. We learn that part of the Sonarosphere is actually on land, but it's surrounded by a barrier. How you open it is important because it also acts as a power source for the Sonaro itself. If it's destroyed, the entire Sonarosphere will collapse. But not only that, the suspended ruins, along with the tacit discords it houses, will come crashing down on Raguna. We ask if anyone has ever tried to open the barrier, and she tells us yes. She's noticed someone outside the barrier attempting to get in. When we ask if there's any distinguishing features, Cartathea says this person's frequency reminds her of a deep sea jellyfish. While Rover hasn't met this person yet, we already know who this person is: Cantarella. Chacona's forte ability starts to break down, so we return back to the real world. But before we do, we promise that we'll find that person and find a way to the Sonarosphere. When our consciousness returns to our physical form, Chacona is all worried, wondering if we died or fell asleep. We tell her that, nah, it was really helpful, but she thinks we fell asleep anyway. So we fill her in on what happened during her forte ability. Afterwards, just as she asks, what are we going to do next, a man approaches representing the Phasalia family. He tells us that he's been sent to invite us to the Phasalia estate for a discussion with the head of the family. She wants
to clear up some unfortunate misunderstandings that occurred previously.
Because if you guys remember, back in the 2.0 main story, some of the Phasalias we encountered played a very antagonistic role. So we tell him that we'll drop by at a later time. After this, he walks away. After he walks away, we find out that Carlotta of the Montellis is in the middle of negotiations with the Phasalias. Of course, there's bad blood between the two factions. So the timing of this invitation comes across as a kind of chess move from the head of the Phasalias. Because of this chess move, Chacona tells us that the head of the Phasalias is just like the rumors. And we really don't know anything about the head of the Phasalias. So we ask her about those rumors. And just as rumors go, some things will prove to be true and others won't. So first, we're told that she's a recluse, that no one outside the family knows her real name, and they just call her the head of the Phasalia family. Between Shadow of the Ancient, Lady Bane, and Entangler of Hearts, she asks, which rumor would we like to hear first? And Rover is just like, bruh. They all sound like clickbait titles. Dang, even in the post-apocalyptic future, we still got clickbait. So anyway, we tell her, just give us the Cliff Notes version. And Chacona tells us that the Phasalia family are said to be the first group of people to step foot on the islands and establish order in Renacita. They predate the Order of the Deep. Their special talent for crafting toxins from aquatic plants has been passed down through the generations. She tells us that word on the street is that they have to select a new head of the family by having candidates ingest each other's toxins. And the last man standing wins. But the current head didn't even do that. She's rumored to have taken a step further by poisoning her predecessor. Other rumors involve her being a master manipulator who drowns people in hallucinations. Either way, Chacona tells us to be careful if we decide to meet her. All of these rumors somehow begin to remind Rover of the person Cartathea described on the outside of the barrier. So we decide to go ahead and make that visit. The place where the meeting is to be held is Portovino Castle. And as we approach, we get a call from Carlotta, and she acknowledges the Phasalia chess move and says if they try anything funny, she'll get us out, even if that means storming their front gates. She says that in the meantime, she'll keep looking for info on the person Cardi described, and she'll let us know if she finds anything. So when we get inside, we're almost immediately greeted by Cantarella, the 36th matriarch of the Phasalia family. And she's super polite and proper. She recognizes our status as the honorable laureate and the new crown of the carnival. But that isn't the only thing she knows about us. Girlie has been taking some notes. So anyway, she invites us back to her study to talk. And when we get there, she apologizes about Gilberto. And if you don't remember Gilberto Phasalia, he's the guy from Act 1 that kind of kicked things off in terms of villainous acts. Anyway, as she apologizes, she offers us some tea, which is really sus, coming from a family with a reputation of poisoning people. So at this point, we're given a choice of whether to accept the apology and drink the tea, or refuse and push the tea aside. Upon accepting, you're given a bit of extra information that you don't really get if you refuse. Rover recognizes this tea from Jingzhou, and we later find out that's because Cantarella isn't the recluse she's rumored to be. She's cool with Chung Li, and she visits Huang Long often. And this explains how she got the tea and how she knows so much about us. Cantarella asks our opinion of Raguna, and we respond that it feels peaceful in a way that feels wrong. She expected someone like ourselves to notice something was amiss, because she knows we've experienced a Thernoidian invasion firsthand. She asks, what is it that we find most unsettling about Raguna? And Rover responds by asking what we all want to know.
Why haven't the Thernoidian and the Sentinel ever shown themselves?
And it's here that we learn that the Thernoidian's invasion of Raguna concluded a long time ago. The Thernoidian has the ability to merge and assimilate. Cantarella explains how the Thernoidian functions, saying that it uses distorted beliefs to spread a spiritual plague that slowly devours civilization from the inside. Once the soul fractures, the mind will follow, until only a puppet remains. She tells us that the Thernoidians' two previous attempts to devour Raguna by the spiritual plague failed. But these events still had a lasting impact. I mean, just look at the Order of the Deep. While some of their beliefs are true, to this day, they still worship imagery of the Thernoidian, a half-horse, half-sea creature divinity. And the Thernoidian doesn't take kindly to those who know the truth, so the Phasalias have been feigning ignorance and allegiance to the Thernoidian. Statues of the Thernoidian in Portovino Castle are covered in dust, because no one respects or worships them. They're just there to represent an unbroken friendship between the Order and the Phasalias. Cantarella takes us to a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf, and she tells us that now that we're here,
I can't let you leave, even if you want to.
And it's here that we discover lore bomb after lore bomb. We're shown the true form of the Sentinel for the first time. A majestic steed that galloped with the wind, not a creature of the ocean's depths. The Sentinel only assumed this half-sea creature, half-horse form after their corruption by the Thernoidian. The corruption led to a type of assimilation where Sentinel Imperator and the Thernoidian share the same body. At this point, the Sentinel's aura hasn't yet completely faded, but Cantarella isn't certain of the Sentinel's condition. And that's precisely why she sought us out. She wants us to leverage our relationship with Jue, the Sentinel of Jingzhou, and persuade it to come save Sentinel Imperator. She promises that she'd agree to whatever terms and conditions we make, only if we do this favor. But we straight up refuse, because Sentinels aren't really supposed to leave their commission post. Additionally, Jue is still recovering from the things that occurred on Mount Firmament. Despite all this, we tell Cantarella there might be another way. We recount the hidden information we uncovered with Carlotta about the stained glass windows and the tower ruins. We explain all about our discoveries at that tower, which is basically that the Maiden would emerge as a Sentinel's resonator and save Raguna from the Denodian. Cantarella shares what we gathered was partially true, but states that that's not exactly how the Sentinel chooses its resonator. It's through resonance with a certain object. And we're like, word? That's not how Jewett did it. Cantarella continues her explanation, saying that it's because Sentinel Imperator has the power to split and manipulate space, and it used this ability to leave a portion of its power in the artifact before us. A sword named Turvin. The resonator who wields this blade can call upon a portion of Imperator's power, and this is how the Sentinel selects his resonator. Only the chosen one can draw the sword. Then we ask about Cardi. What is her role in all of this? Cantarella says the nature of the martyred Maiden's resonance is unclear. She doesn't know if she resonated with the Denodian or the Sentinel in its corrupted form, but she's certain of one thing. It could not have been the Sentinel's will. The Phasalias had been attempting to resonate with Turvin for years. From Cantarella's story quest, we learned that every year the family would hold divine trials, where young women would go through torturous tests to gauge their will, and many died during this process. Only those who reached the final stages of this trial were allowed to touch this artifact while overclocking to attempt to reach their second awakening. And while none of these young women would become the Sentinel's resonator, in doing this, they would get glimpses of the truth hidden within the resonance. And while it isn't stated here, Cantarella would eventually be the one that later resonates with the Sentinel. During this trial, she was able to see the corrupted Sentinel, the inverted tower in the sky, and learn that only Turvin can break the barrier to that Sonaro sphere. After this vision, Cantarella received a chilling message. The words, "The Maiden is dead," were inscribed on her hand. After all of this, Rover is left trying to decipher the truth of it all. Like, what really is going on with Cardi? What's the status of the Sentinel? And what's really good with this artifact? Finally, he's like, man, give me that sword. He picks it up. No overclocking, no divine trial, no problem. And Cantarella is just like, bruh, who are you? And we respond saying, Jue calls me the Arbiter. Cantarella is taken aback by all of this. And finally, we explain that we spoke to Cartathea earlier, which makes her even more confused. How is a martyred maiden still alive? Now knowing we are the Sentinel's Arbiter, Cantarella asks us once more if we'd help save Sentinel Imperator and bring Raguna back from the brink of chaos. We agree and attempt to return the sword to her, but she shakes her head in refusal, saying that Turvin can only serve its purpose while in our hands. Being the one who Cardi saw lurking outside the barrier, Cantarella knows exactly how to find the place. So we leave with her through a secret exit. As to why the Phasalias have a cable car that leads directly to the Sonaro, well, that's because it wasn't always a Sonaro sphere. It was once a seminary of the Order, known as Avenolium. Of course, in days past, the family maintained a healthy relationship with the Order. The wealthy kids of the Phasalia family would go there to study. We find out that Cartathea, the Blessed Maiden, was also a student there. Eventually, we board the Echo Fish train and head to Bore Waters, the place where the seminary was located. During the trip, we tell Cantarella that she definitely seems different than the rumors. And of course, she asks about those rumors, and we tell her that people were calling her a recluse. And she almost sounded disgusted. A recluse? She then reveals that she's far from it, and she actually doesn't even spend much time in Renacita, mainly because she's been searching all over Solaris for a way to help the Sentinel. Later, she tells us that she sought aid from the other Sentinels too, but they all refused after all her leads fell short. A friend in Mingting in Huanglong introduced her to stories of us. And who is this person in the capital that knows us and somehow has knowledge of almost everything in Huanglong? While it isn't explicitly stated, we know who she's referring to. Anyways, we ask Cantarella, why doesn't she put those other, more harmful rumors to rest? You know, rumors about being a mystic or obsessed with poison or poisoning her predecessor. And she responds, because the rest of them are all true. So if you've played Cantarella's story quest, you know that the Phasalias love their poisons. And here, piggybacking off the previous conversation, Cantarella tells us why. Why would she poison the previous head of the family? Well, she explains to us that this has been a tradition in the family for centuries, every generation. And the reason why is because the Thenodian acts like a virus. When it infects someone, it slowly corrupts them over time through its whispers and suggestions, until the person is no longer themselves anymore. They're now only a puppet of the Thenodian. So when this happens, based on tradition, the successor must kill them with a poison of their own making. We begin to make our way to the Sonarosphere, and along the way, we learn some key historical facts. Here in Avenolium, the largest seminary of the order, is where the second dark tide originated from. And it happened
On the very day the Blessed Maiden passed her trials and was crowned by the Order.
Cantarella goes on to tell us that most of the people remember the seminary disappearing into the sky. But due to a lack of records, hardly anyone remembers the second dark tide. The second dark tide should have enveloped all of Renacita, but for some unknown reason, that did not happen. Cantarella actually remembers seeing all this unfold from a boat just outside the seminary, and at this time, she was just an ordinary member of the family. It's obvious that something or someone stopped the spread of the dark tide. Cantarella and Rover try to piece together exactly what happened. Was it the Sentinels doing, or Cardi's? Quick sidebar. Now the story is pretty straightforward to grasp, but the devil is in the details, and there are some things that just can't really be explained right now in terms of the order of events and the timeline of it all. Of course, Kuro could fix these things by introducing characters, plot devices, and just different stuff to clear it up. But if you're like me and like to delve into some of the minutiae of things, you might ask yourself several questions at this point. But because this video is already lengthy, let's get into that in another video. Moving on. So eventually, we make it to Avenolium. There we use Turvin to break the barrier and enter the Sonaro. Once finally inside, Cardi happily greets us, the rover, but is confused as to who Cantarella is. She's like, yo, who is this girl? Anyway, after a brief exchange, it's revealed that Cantarella once saw Cardi at the carnival, and she still looks the same as she did that day. But in reality, her and Cantarella should be around the same age. Cardi tells us that she doesn't really know what happened to her, and she's been searching for answers by herself. Just as we entered the Sonaro, some of her previously lost knowledge was returned to her. And apparently more than that, because Cantarella points out that she shouldn't even know about Turvin or the fact that it holds the Sentinel's power. This knowledge is supposed to only be granted to those who resonate with Turvin. Cardi asks to touch the sword, but because she doesn't resonate, she begins to believe she's the Thenodian's resonator. And of course, we'll later learn this to be true. Eventually, more of Cardi's memories come flowing back to her. She recalls that there are 2 other swords. These other swords all hold special meanings. Turvin, the sword of divinity, holds Sentinel Imperator's frequency. Hognus, the sword of discord, holds Leviathan Thenodian's frequency. And Haltier, the sword of virtue, is Cartithea's own personal sword. The seals surrounding the inverted tower can only be broken by placing all 3 swords on their respective pedestals. Cardi is baffled that these memories are only just coming back now, and she questions if this is the Sentinel or the Thenodians doing. Rover inserts Turvin into the pedestal, and the Avenolium ruins are thrusted into the sky, where the rest of the remains of the seminary reside, revealing the giant spire in the center and the seals mentioned earlier. The gravity up there is different, and we find out that that's to prevent everything from crashing down, the dark tide, the tacit discords, and the ruins themselves. As we marvel at the view, Cantarella recalls this place from her visions. We begin to prepare to break these seals. Cardi summons a gondola named Foam to transport us to where we need to go. But the gondola is a 2-seater, so we have to figure something out. By the way, I appreciate the dialogue options actually give different responses. If you choose the option, "Can we make room for one more?" Cantarella responds by putting her hand on her chin, saying, "Boy, you better stop being greedy." I mean, she doesn't say it like that, but still, I thought it was funny. Anyways, We continue on with Cardi navigating the ruins to obtain the swords, travel to their pedestals, and break the seals. She explains that even though she's been stuck here all this time, she's only been able to navigate through a small select number of places because she's lacking her former power, and there are tacit discords and dark tide remnant energy everywhere. Once Turvin is placed on its designated pedestal, the rover and Cardi are greeted with visions of Cartithea's past. These memories are of her coronation as the Blessed Maiden in Avenolium, and the sudden emergence of the Dark Tide right afterwards. Almost immediately after this, Abby pops out, and he is furious. He tells us that there's this mysterious huge frequency that just entered into our tacit mark, and it almost crushed him. We deduce that this must have happened because of us placing the sword on the pedestal. This energy contains the Sentinel's frequencies, but they're mixed in with the Thenodians. We decide to spend the night here and rest in the room with this pedestal. We take this opportunity to question Cantarella about the Phasalia's involvement in the ancient war. Cantarella confirms, saying that her family once led a faction responsible for the conflict presented on those stained glass windows, the same stained glass windows we saw in those ruins with Carlotta. After defeat, the Phasalias later withdrew from public eye due to the immense pressure and disgrace. We ask if that's the reason the family decided to publicly change their beliefs, and she says no, the real reason is much more complex. She reveals a secret long hidden by her family, and the hidden truth is that Turvin, the divine sword, was actually given to them by Napoli II, the first Primus. In his final days, Napoli revealed to them that the legend of the Dark Tide and the Pilgrim Sail was just a myth. When he traveled to the end of his pilgrimage, he found that there was no sanctuary and no reward for enduring all of that. There was only darkness and suffering. The seemingly heavenly voices were not oracles from the Sentinel, they were whispers of the Thenodian. She once again reminds us that when the Thenodian begins to corrupt a person, it continues until only a puppet remains. It requires a puppet to carry its voice. Napoli was becoming that puppet. She goes on to explain more history about Napoli II, the first Dark Tide, and the Sentinel. And if you've seen part 1 of this video, you already know, but long story short, the Sentinel imbued its power to Napoli, aiding him in combating the Dark Tide. They were victorious in stopping it, but unable to kill the Thenodian. Eventually, the corruption would take its toll on Napoli, and he would beg to be released from this world. Of course, the Phasalias aided in this request because, come on, they off their own people for less. The truth of this matter and the things Napoli revealed would later become a secret between the Order and the Phasalias. When we ask about Cardi, Cantarella expresses her thoughts candidly. She lets us know that she doesn't trust her. But not because she doesn't want to. She believes she stands with humanity. It's because she wants to make sure she isn't unknowingly succumbing to the Thenodian's whisper. So she chooses to think rationally and err on the side of caution. We're now given the chance to speak to Cardi one-on-one. She tells us all that she remembers about the Dark Tide, and it feels pretty eerie as she describes it, especially because I didn't catch the quotation marks during my first playthrough. She says it is paradise. And we're like, you're joking, right? She says that
it is a place where sickness, hunger, sorrow, despair, and dullness of heart cease to exist. There, deacons sing eternal hymns.
It becomes evident that she's quoting these words from something, but as of now, it isn't clear what. Cartithea explains in detail about the corrupting force of the Dark Tide. The Dark Tide assimilates all life it touches, seducing even non-believers. Once a soul is fully corrupted, it becomes part of a relentless, sleepless choir. Eventually, the land overtaken by the Dark Tides becomes a journeying paradise, spreading its dark gospel everywhere. Cartithea confirms this is the future she saw after being exposed to the Dark Tide. As the sun rises, we continue journeying through the realm to find and place the other 2 remaining swords on their respective pedestals. When we place Hognus, the Thenodian sword, onto its pedestal, both Rover and Cardi get a vision of the past. In this vision, Cartithea is speaking to the Thenodian. She straight up calls it out and says it's a false divinity. She resists its guidance, stands on the side of humanity, and stands on business. And this happens after what appears to be the conclusion of the dark tide. After this, our tacit mark begins to glow. The origin of those frequencies that were absorbed earlier still evades us and Cardi, and we deduce that we'll find the answer after placing the final sword. Cardi and Rover decide to rest up and continue their journey tomorrow. But suddenly, we're awoken in the middle of the night by singing. We investigate the source and find Cardi singing some ways away. She's singing to reverberations of dragons that once lived in the Zargon Garden of Avenolium. She explains that this song is a farewell song for the people of Renacita. It's usually sung when a friend is about to leave, but during the battle, she never got a chance to say goodbye, and she's unsure if these reverberations can still hear her. We tell her that we believe that they can feel what's in her heart. Not just to be comforting, Rover really believes this to be true. Rover reflects back on the experience of seeing Zhang Liao reconcile with his deceased friend from within the scenario. We tell her that as long as their obsession remains and the scenario stays intact, they won't vanish. She recites to herself this phrase,
"Bound by obsession, till relieved of duty."
Cardi says she wants to stay a moment and asks us to keep her company. We awake the next morning with her asleep on our shoulder. Then we begin our pursuit of the final sword, Haltir. After finding and placing Haltir on its pedestal, Cardi and Rover get another vision of Cardithea's past. In this vision, the Thermodian reminds Cardi of just who he is. He asks, why does she resonate with him? Why does she act as its oracle? Why is she able to hear into the minds of the faithful? Then he drops the bomb. The Thermodian says that he made her life, her will, her past. He says that he made her whole. He made her perfect. He says that he fed upon the trust, adoration, and longing heaped upon her by the masses. Finally, he says that her resonance with him brought forth the second dark tide. Then the vision concludes. Cardi says she finally remembers everything now. She says her crown transformed to this when the second dark tide began. Once a symbol of unity, this crown is what the Thermodian uses to exert control over its resonator. She explains that after she cut down the Thermodian and ended the second dark tide, she split herself into two beings. And the Cardithea we see before us is the part of her that wished to live. The other is Fleur-de-Lis. Fleur-de-Lis retains most of her physical strength and power, but after striking down and destroying the Thermodian, she became corrupted by the Thermodian's power. The Thermodian's endless whispers and screeches are slowly chipping away at Fleur-de-Lis's resolve, torturing her soul. Now, Cardi tells us she wants to destroy what remains of the Thermodian before it becomes stronger and completely consumes Fleur-de-Lis, bound by obsession till relieved of duty. She says that she's been instinctively seeking us out, someone who can wield the Sentinel's power and withstand the pull of the Leviathan. The Thermodian dwelling within Fleur-de-Lis must be destroyed so it can be finally defeated forever. To do this, Cardi says that Fleur-de-Lis must be destroyed, trapping the Thermodian within her lifeless body. Cardithea wants us to help her merge back with her other half and essentially kill her to ensure the Thermodian's demise. She says her farewells to Rover and asks us to send her regards to Cantarella. Rover agrees to accompany her to Fleur-de-Lis, but when we get there, he's like, nah bruh, I ain't doing that. Fall back. We doing this my way. Then we take the elevator and prepare to square up. After this, Cantarella steps into frame. She says that she arrived earlier, but it just didn't seem like a good time to interrupt. She reveals that she was the Blessed Maiden and recounts the events we've discussed earlier surrounding the Thermodian's defeat. She gives Cardi a restored turban and says that even though she's the false Blessed Maiden, there's no reason why a false Blessed Maiden can't become the real Blessed Maiden. So with this, Cardi takes the elevator up to join us to face off against Fleur-de-Lis. As she does, Cantarella is approached by a group of tacit discords attempting to intervene.
Come to me, mighty god killer.
In the cinematic battle against Fleur-de-Lis, we're nearly defeated until Cartithia intervenes with Turvin. She overextends her power in attempt to save us. Turvin breaks against the mighty power of Fleur-de-Lis. Cardi sacrifices herself in order to gain us more power. We, blessed with the power of Arrow, rise again, using all the power we've unlocked so far, defeat Fleur-de-Lis. After which she says, "Well done," and she reverts back to Cartithia. She falls from the sky lifelessly. We catch her and bring her body safely to the ground, but Abby confirms that her frequency is already gone. That's right, she did, which also implies that it worked, that the Nodian is dead. I'm not so sure about that, but maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that in another video. Anyways, suddenly we are mentally transported into another realm, and before us we see the Sentinel. Due to its body being destroyed during the Second Dark Tide, this is kind of the only way it can manifest to us. It's basically a shell of its former self at this point. It safeguarded its core data so that it wouldn't be wholly assimilated, and that's what we're talking to now. We ask if it can save Cardi, and it gives us a rundown of all the major past events leading up to this point, all of which are covered in part 1 of this video. Imperator asks us to tell the Vesalius, from this day forward, they are free. Sentinel Imperator then uses its remaining life force to resurrect Cartithia. Imperator asks if Cartithia wants to remove those terrible memories of her past, but she says no. Those memories make her who she is and give her her purpose and strength. Fleur-de-Lis appears to Cartithia and says she would be a more perfect being without her. But Cardi says no and fully accepts all of who she is. Imperator says her will forge a new era unbound by doctrine and prophecy. Before dissipating, Imperator bestows her the title of Blessed Maiden. Then, Abby acknowledges that Cartithia is the reason he stopped suffering from his mysterious ailment, the whole reason we started this journey in the first place. Finally, we go check on Cantarella. She made it out of the Sonaro safely and gives us this Blood Pact's Pledge, a sword that symbolizes the unbreakable pact between us and the Vesalia family. She tells us that each head of the family is given one and only one of these swords, and she's giving us hers because we vanquished the Thermodian and brought peace to the Vesalius. Lastly, we relay the message from Imperator. And that is the main story of Act 4 of Chapter 2. There are a number of things I'd like to talk about in detail regarding what we got from the story, but they didn't quite fit into the scope of this video. So I kind of found myself simultaneously writing 2 other videos at the time of doing this one. It just kind of happened as I was going through the story and different thoughts were coming to me. I'm really excited to see what's coming out next because I think it's safe to say that the Renacita story isn't concluded yet. There's still tons of things we don't really have an end to yet. Nonetheless, stay on the lookout for those videos I mentioned earlier because we're about to get surgical. Anyways, that is all I have for you guys today. In addition to liking and subscribing, if you'd like to further support the channel, consider joining the channel. I'll leave a link in the description. And until next time, I'll catch you in the waves. Peace.